I worship you.
Every Sunday morning, Deborah Adeyemi stood at the center of Grace Covenant Chapel, her voice rising above the choir like a flame that refused to flicker. She was 26, radiant in her white and gold aso ebi, and when she lifted her hands to lead worship, the entire congregation seemed to lift with her. Mothers pointed her out to their daughters. Fathers whispered to their sons, "That is the kind of woman you should marry." She was Pastor Emmanuel Adeyemi's only daughter, and in the eyes of Lagos society, she was flawless. She taught Sunday school to the youth. She organized the widows' outreach. She sang like an angel who had wandered too far from heaven and decided to stay. Her father often told the congregation, with tears threatening his eyes, that Deborah was proof that God still made righteous children in a corrupt generation, if only he knew. By the time the last amen faded on Sunday evenings, Deborah had already begun to disappear. Not physically, she still hugged the elderly women at the door, still promised to visit sick members of the congregation, still smiled the smile everyone had come to expect. But somewhere behind her eyes, a second woman was waking up. A woman with a different name, a woman with calloused hands, and a heart hardened by things she had seen in the underbelly of the city. Her father preached hope into every week. They called her Hope. The rescue network operated out of a modest, unmarked building in Aja, disguised as a logistics company. No signage suggested what really happened inside. Safe houses coordinated across 3 states, extraction teams that moved in the dead of night, and a small, fiercely loyal group of volunteers who risked everything to pull women and children out of the hands of traffickers. Deborah had stumbled into this world 4 years earlier, when a girl from her own street had vanished, promised a job in Dubai that turned out to be something far darker. The girl was never found. Deborah had grieved in silence, unable to explain to her father why she cried for a girl she barely knew. That grief had calcified into purpose. She found the network through a distant cousin, trained quietly, and within a year, she was no longer just donating money in secret, she was in the field. She became skilled at the things her Sunday school life never could have prepared her for, reading fear in a stranger's eyes, memorizing safe house routes, negotiating with informants who wanted more money than promised, and disappearing into the back of an unmarked van seconds before danger arrived. She wore a wig, contact lenses, and clothes nothing like the modest dresses her father approved of. She was unrecognizable, and that was the point. Her family believed she spent those nights mentoring troubled teenagers from the church, a story she had built so carefully that even her mother repeated it to her friends with pride. "Deborah has such a soft heart," her mother would say, "always out there helping someone. If only they understood how true, and how far from the truth, those words really were." The mission that would unravel everything started on an ordinary Thursday night. A tip came in about a house in Ikorodu where several girls, some as young as 15, were being held before what the traffickers called processing, a term Deborah had learned to despise more than any other. The extraction went wrong almost immediately. 2 of the girls were moved before the team arrived. But one girl, thin, trembling, no older than 16, was pulled from a locked room and driven straight to a safe house. Her name was Blessing, and she would not stop shaking even hours after she was declared safe. It was in the safe house, past midnight, that Blessing showed Deborah the video. She had recorded it secretly on a smuggled phone weeks earlier, capturing a meeting she wasn't supposed to witness, men discussing shipment routes, payments, and the names of buyers as casually as if they were negotiating crates of tomatoes. The footage was grainy, the voices sometimes muffled, but one section was chillingly clear. A well-dressed man, addressed with obvious deference by the traffickers, promising additional funding for the operation in exchange for quiet handling of the next shipment. Deborah's blood went cold when she recognized the voice. It belonged to Chief Augustine Okonkwo, the church's most celebrated benefactor, the man who had funded the new sanctuary roof, the man her father called a true man of God's favor from the pulpit. The man who sat in the front row every Sunday, hands raised during worship, singing along to every song Deborah led. She had led worship in front of a wolf for years without knowing it. Within 48 hours, it was clear the traffickers knew the video existed. Blessing's escape had triggered a scramble. Someone in the operation had realized a phone was missing, and worse, that its contents could expose not just a trafficking ring, but a man whose reputation and money protected the entire network's silence. Deborah's handler, a soft-spoken but unshakable woman named Auntie Ronki, called an emergency meeting. "They will not stop until they find this girl and the phone," Ronki said. "And if they suspect anyone connected to church circles, they'll come looking there too. Chief Okonkwo has too much to lose." Deborah felt the walls of her double life groan under new pressure. She had always known the risk of exposure to her family, the shame it would bring, the confusion, the accusations. But now, the risk was sharper. If the traffickers connected the dots between Hope and Deborah Adeyemi, her family wouldn't just be embarrassed. They would be in danger. She threw herself into protecting Blessing, moving her between two safe houses within a single week, personally overseeing the digital backup of the video onto an encrypted drive hidden inside an old hymn book she kept in her car, an irony that made her laugh bitterly the first time she thought of it. But the strain was showing. She was exhausted, distracted, and sharper-tongued at home than she used to be. Her mother noticed the dark circles under her eyes. Her father noticed the missed calls, the late nights, the sudden secrecy around her phone. Word began to spread, not the truth, but a distorted, dangerous rumor. A member of the congregation claimed to have seen Deborah entering a hotel late at night, unaware that it was actually a rendezvous point to transfer a rescued woman to a safer location. Another whispered that she had been seen arguing with a strange man in a parked car, Ronki, disguised, delivering urgent instructions. By the time these stories passed through 5 different mouths, Deborah had become, in the eyes of half the congregation, a woman secretly consumed by something scandalous. Pastor's daughter, always going out at odd hours. They say she doesn't even answer her father's calls sometimes. You know these quiet ones, they're always hiding something. Pastor Adeyemi, a man who had built his ministry on integrity and appearances of order, felt the whispers like blades. He confronted Deborah one evening in his study, his voice trembling between anger and heartbreak. "Tell me the truth, Deborah. Where do you go at night? What is this shadow that has fallen over my daughter?" She wanted to tell him everything. She wanted to describe Blessing's trembling hands, the safe houses, the danger she carried to protect strangers he would never meet. But she knew, with painful clarity, that if she told him, he might try to stop her, or worse, he might unknowingly let something slip to the wrong person, endangering the entire operation and Chief Okonkwo's unsuspecting downfall. So she did what broke her heart most. She said nothing, and let her silence be mistaken for guilt. "I am not the person the rumors say I am, Daddy. That is all I can tell you right now. Please trust me." He did not answer. He simply looked at her the way a man looks at a stranger wearing his daughter's face. 3 weeks after the extraction, disaster struck. A junior volunteer, careless with a shared drive, accidentally leaked a low-resolution clip of the safe house footage, not the trafficking video itself, but internal recordings of Deborah, in her Hope disguise, coordinating a rescue. It reached a gossip blog under a scandalous headline, "Pastor's Daughter's Secret Nightlife Exposed. Is Grace Covenant's Golden Girl Living a Double Life?" The clip, taken out of context, showed Deborah in unfamiliar clothes, speaking urgently to strangers in a dim room, exchanging what looked, to untrained eyes, like a covert, illicit deal. The video spread through Lagos social media within hours. By Sunday, half the congregation had seen it. Chief Okonkwo, recognizing the danger the moment he saw it, moved quickly to fan the flames rather than let suspicion fall anywhere near himself. He was the one who first suggested, loudly and self-righteously, that the church look deeper into what Sister Deborah has truly been doing all this time. It was the ultimate act of a guilty man burying his sin beneath someone else's ashes. Pastor Adeyemi stood before his congregation that Sunday, a man visibly shattered. Members who had once sung Deborah's praises now murmured behind their programs. Her mother wept quietly in the front pew, and Deborah, watching from the back of the sanctuary where she had once led thousands in worship, felt the ground of her carefully built life crack beneath her feet. That night, Ronke called an emergency meeting. "They're using the leak to bury you and protect Okonkwo," she said. "We move now, or we lose everything, blessing, the evidence, all of it." Deborah made a decision that terrified her more than any nighttime extraction ever had. She would go public, not with lies, not with excuses, but with the truth, and with the evidence that had cost so much to protect. She requested an emergency meeting with the church elders, her father presiding, her mother seated beside him with red, swollen eyes. The room was heavy with judgment before she even spoke. "I know what you've seen," Deborah began, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. "And I know what you believe about me. I am not going to defend myself with excuses. I am going to show you the truth." She played the footage, not the leaked clip, but the original video Blessing had recorded, the one capturing Chief Okonkwo's voice, discussing trafficking shipments with chilling casualness. The room fell utterly silent. Even the man himself, seated near the back, believing he had already won, went pale as his own voice echoed through speakers he never expected to hear it from. "For 4 years," Deborah continued, "I have worked with a rescue network that saves women and children from trafficking and abuse. The nights I disappeared, the secrecy, the strange hours, that was never sin, Daddy. That was blessing." She gestured, and the trembling teenage girl stepped forward from where she had been waiting outside, escorted by Ronke. "That was every girl we've pulled out of a locked room in the dead of night. That was the double life I lived, not to shame this family, but to protect it from ever having to bury someone the way we almost buried her." Chief Okonkwo tried to rise, sputtering denials, but 2 church elders, men who had long quietly wondered about the source of his sudden and excessive generosity, blocked his path. Someone had already called the authorities the moment the video began to play, at Ronke's quiet instruction. The arrest of Chief Augustine Okonkwo 3 days later sent shockwaves through Lagos society far beyond the walls of Grace Covenant Chapel. Newspapers that once celebrated his philanthropy now dissected his hidden empire, the shipment routes, the false job agencies, the years of exploitation disguised behind boardroom respectability. Investigators, working from the evidence Deborah and her network had risked everything to protect, dismantled a trafficking operation that had operated in plain sight for nearly a decade. Blessing, along with several other survivors identified through the investigation, was placed under long-term care and eventually reunited with an aunt who had spent 2 years searching for her. She would go on, months later, to testify, carefully and with support, in the trial that finally saw Okonkwo and his associates charged. Inside the church, the transformation was slower, quieter, but no less profound. Pastor Adeyemi did not speak to his daughter for 2 full days after the elders' meeting. He needed time, he told her, not because he doubted her courage, but because he had to reckon with his own blindness, how he had celebrated a wolf's donations while remaining suspicious of his own daughter's sacrifice. When he finally came to her, he did not begin with words. He simply embraced her, the way he had when she was a child running to him after a fall, and wept into her shoulder like a man finally allowed to grieve a fear he hadn't known he carried. "I preached about hidden sin for 20 years, he told her later, his voice hoarse. I never once imagined I would have to learn that some of the deepest righteousness I have ever seen was also hidden in my own house, right in front of me. Deborah's mother, for her part, asked only one question, over and over, in the weeks that followed. Were you ever afraid? Every single time, Deborah admitted. But I was more afraid of what would happen if I did nothing. Grace Covenant Chapel changed after that Sunday. Pastor Adeyemi began a new ministry initiative, quietly funding safe houses and partnering, openly, at Deborah's careful guidance, though still with appropriate discretion for the safety of ongoing operations, with organizations fighting trafficking across Lagos. He preached a sermon, weeks later, that many still speak of, a message titled, The Ministry Outside the Building, in which he confessed his own long-held assumption that faithfulness could be measured by how often someone was seen inside a sanctuary. We built an altar out of appearances, he told his congregation, his voice breaking with a humility his church had never seen from him before. And in doing so, we nearly missed the truest form of worship happening in the dark, where no one was watching but God. Deborah no longer needed her double life. She still worked with the rescue network, but now with her father's blessing rather than his suspicion, and with resources the church could finally, openly provide. She still led worship on Sundays, her voice rising the same way it always had. But now, when she sang, the members of Grace Covenant Chapel understood a little more of what those songs had always meant to her. Every lyric about sacrifice, about carrying burdens in secret, about faith that cost something, she had been living them all along. Blessing came to church with her aunt one Sunday, months later, sitting quietly in a back pew. When the service ended, she found Deborah and hugged her without a word. Neither of them needed to explain what the embrace meant. Some rescues cannot be spoken, they can only be felt. As for Chief Okonkwo, his trial became a cautionary tale, repeated in churches and homes across the city, a reminder that generosity is not the same as goodness, and that the loudest amen in the room does not always come from the most righteous heart. Pastor Adeyemi, in the final line of the sermon that would define the rest of his ministry, offered words that Deborah kept framed on her wall for the rest of her life. Do not judge a soul by what you see them do inside these walls. God's greatest work often happens where the lights are dimmest, and the only witness is Him, and sometimes the daughter you never fully knew. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this.